particularly difficult. A march for the playoffs continue, with the playoffs already underway, and a meeting at the racing capital of the world. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway hosted the 20th race of the season and the second playoff event for the 2021 Four-Wide Racing Cup Series. Welcome to live coverage right here on MaxSpeedTV. Always happy that you're joining us once again for playoff competition, where alongside Francisco Bacquiao in the booth, my name is Kenneth Bueno. And Francisco, we step now to quite possibly the crown jewel, at least venue in iRacing and in real racing themselves. Of course, the Indianapolis 500, the Brickyard 400. But in this sort of case, this series has never been to this track in this entire season, more from last week and the short track at Richmond, and now things will continue to tighten up once we get here from Indianapolis.
Happy to be up here in this booth here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway with you, Kenneth, and we're going to be in for a good one today. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a historic racetrack. You just mentioned it, the Brickyard 400, the Indianapolis 500. Multiple times it's hosted the U.S. Grand Prix, and winning here means a lot for your career just because of what a racetrack this is. You just go think about all the legends that have won at this racetrack. I mean, you think about just recently, speaking of history, when Castroneves won his fourth Indianapolis 500, and you also think of drivers like Jimmy Johnson who've won this race 5 times. So if you're able to win here, you join a list of legends that have been able to get it done here, and it's not going to be easy. And it also being a playoff race is going to play a big role as far as what strategy does get played out and who decides to be aggressive and maybe who decides to be a little bit conservative. But once it comes down to those final laps, it's going to be all on the line for a win at such a historic venue.
It is going to get more difficult from here because of those point standings, and of course the playoffs going to slim it down to 5 after 2 races after this one when we get to Kansas and Kentucky. Before we do that, before we get into that though, we'll take a look at just where we are in the virtual world, as we'll take a look at our track map with images courtesy of our friends at Google Earth. And of course you can tell just how influential the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is when the city it's located in is named Speedway, Indiana. Of course, that's where it's located, 2.5 miles, with banking at about 9.2 degrees in each corner, 0 degrees on the straights. But this track, very, very difficult, Francisco, in both the Indy cars and stock cars and really any car you put it on, because although it looks rather simple, this rectangle here, 2.5 miles, rather large, you have these corners that are relatively flat, so you have to keep your momentum through there while also making sure that you're getting to the short chutes and the entrances and exits to the back straightaway and front straightaway without hitting the wall. And with these cars tonight, Francisco, in the stock cars, that's going to pose a very big challenge once the tires start to wear out and once the dirty air really starts to kick in as well.
Yeah, and with these stock cars, Indianapolis tends to be a little bit of a one-lane racetrack once you get to these corners. You're carrying so much speed, but you don't want to get all the way to the bottom of the racetrack. You really don't want to get too far to the left side of that white line in the corners and get into the curb. But if you're too high into the corner, you could find yourself hitting the wall on corner exits. So there's a fine line there. And if you're side by side, once we're up to speed after a restart, you're going to lose so much time. And I mean, you saw there in the overhead just how long these straightaways are. If you have to be single file to have a draft, so you don't lose so much time, because you could easily lose multiple tenths of a second on the straightaways if you're side by side with someone just trying to battle them. So it's going to be crucial for these guys to work that out and sort of give and take early, at least, to figure out where they're going to be, and so they don't lose too much time costing themselves trying to battle for a position that may not be entirely worth it on lap 2, for example. So it's people have to pick their battles here today, and we'll have to see just how it works out.
They're going to have to pick their battles, and the battle, though, resides in the playoff standings. We'll show you what your points are looking like so far after race number 19 at the Richmond Raceway. Of course, Dalton Tucker is not a playoff driver. He captured the win last Wednesday night, but these are the 10 drivers that we are focusing on, and of course, those 5 with the numbers that are not with negatives next to them. Kyle Benson leading the point standings with Craig Lonsarger 3 points behind. Nicholas Vizzuti 6 points behind your points leader. Then Scott Healy and Tyler Murray tied for the 4th spot. They occupy the final, at least, sort of spots before you get to Tyler Warner, who's below that cutoff. Remember, when we get after Kentucky in about 2 weeks' time, that's when we slim it down to 5 for the championship. So Warner, Bishop, Long, Reedy, and of course Brennan T. Banks, who did not make the race last week, 36 points behind the cutoff. These guys are going to have some work to do and may have to settle for a good finish, or else it'll be even worse for them moving forward. But you're seeing the drivers on the grid right now settle behind the iRacing official pace car, and that means it is our time to take a look at your starting grid, see exactly where every driver and your favorite driver will be starting here tonight from the racing capital of the world. Dalton Tucker capturing the win last week at the Richmond Raceway. He will lead us from the pole. 51.945 will lead us to the green flag. Brian M. Smith, though, returns to the competition in the 78 machine. He'll line up the outside of row number 1.
Looking back at your second row, you have Kyle Benson, the points leader of that playoff grid that you just saw a little bit ago. He's returning into the top 5 in qualifying, looking to build on a solid comeback at Richmond to sort of keep himself in that top 5. Justin Mons alongside him, who's looking to make some ground.
Behind him to row number 3, you'll find the 11 of Austin Reedy and the 13 of Craig Lonsog.
The fourth row consists of Tyler B. Murray and Jacob Smith.
And back to row 5, Tyler Werner, playoff driver, will line up 9th, and Nicholas Vizzuti, also playoff competitor, will line at the top 10. We'll take a look through the rest of this field. Christopher Bishop, also playoff competitor, needing some points here with Edward Schur to his outside. Before you find Cody Ivey and Scott Healy, buried back in 14th. He did not take a time in qualifying. Connor E. Cunningham in the 84 will start in the inside of row 8 to the top 15. Pete Bruni will be to his outside, with Ricky Rosner, Brandon Gillis back to 18th, and Roman Long in the 19th spot, still in the playoffs, needing some of those points. He's going to have to climb all the way from the rear of the field. Take a look at the weather before we get started. Temperature about 78 degrees. Track temperature blazing 115 degrees. Where we get started, winds to the southwest at about 9 miles per hour. So we'll see how much that affects these drivers as soon as they start to develop into a run. Well, we are ready to get the green flag for the second playoff race of the 2021 4-Wide Racing Cup Series. Of course, we are happy that you're with us. Pace car going to make its way down to the safety of pit road, and the Chevrolet of Dalton Tucker and the Toyota of Brian M. Smith will lead us to the green flag from Indianapolis.
And even start for your top 2, the 78, trying to challenge on that outside, and so far putting a nose in front of Dalton Tucker. But here they go into turn number 2. He has a little bit of an advantage. Tucker loose on the bottom, but he's able to make it work, and they're still side by side down the back straightaway on lap 1. A little bit of drafting help. Look at this, 3 wide. Justin Mons to the inside.
Justin Mons going to find his way to the bottom, make it 3 wide for the race lead as they head back for 3 and 4 for the first time here tonight. Justin Mons to the front, Justin Mons to the race lead, and a big pickup off turn 2, sent him to the back straightaway, and now the 41 Ford Mustang gonna lead us all the way to the front of this field. You see Kyle Benson trying to make his way down low as well. He's gonna make it 3 wide with Tucker and Smith. So already multiple drivers losing that, or at least not using patience in the first couple laps here.
And Craig Lonsonger was involved in a melee going into turn number 3. He got doored and got into the wall. He has a bunch of right side damage, so a big playoff implications early in the opening lap of this race.
Already earlier implications, you see multiple drivers already heading back to the back straight away as Brian Smith, Dalton Tucker try to do battle for what is third on the racetrack, and already very aggressive goes Tucker. He's going to look down low, but to almost no success. Here comes the 11 of Austin Reedy. He'll try to make a move as well. Almost got a tap of the outside barrier. We come to the short chute again. Like I mentioned earlier, Francisco, that's going to be one of the biggest points of tonight's race, because as soon as the tires start to wear out, the cars get very tight. Plus, you try to add in dirty air. That's going to make things even worse, but I don't think the top 2 really care about that. Kyle Benson trying to duck his nose underneath Justin Mons. They almost make contact.
And they're about to make contact there if they don't. What a close action. You saw the 4 have a run the entire front straightaway with that draft, and he was not going to lift. He was trying to get the nose to the inside to get side by side for that lead, but just look at how much momentum that cost them. Here goes Mons to the inside to try to break the draft. The 78 has caught up to them, and to the inside of Kyle Benson goes Brian M. Smith. There we see Scott Healy in the middle of 3 wide. and look at the 78 of Brian M. Smith move his way up to the second. And here comes Dalton Tucker trying to now pounce on that 4.
These guys are already running very aggressively to start this race. And you got to think, even guys like Kyle Benson, he's the only playoff driver within this top 4. Now bringing 2 playoff drivers in the top 5 once you compound for Scott Healy. But these guys are really going at it in the first handful of laps of this race. Brian M. Smith to the inside for the race lead.
Very aggressive blocking early on in this race by the 41 of Justin Mons, but the clean air means so much. But you also see just how much of a difference the draft makes. You saw the 41 and 78 nearly make contact. I don't think they did, but it forced the 41 up the racetrack, and to the lead goes Brian M. Smith, and there they're going to go 3 wide once again with Dalton Tucker trying to make a move, but he'll back out of it, but he will gain the position on Justin Mons. So Mons will go from 1st to 4th in a matter of 3/4 of a lap.
We can see it as you ride on board with the rear bumper of the 78 Brian M. Smith. There's Kyle Benson washing up the racetrack. He's going to lose about 2 to 3 spots as Scott Healy will also try to pounce in. That is for a playoff point. So in turn, that's going to make a big difference if they continue to tussle for that position. But here's going to be the key, Francisco, that we're already seeing it in at least the first couple laps of this race. I'm pretty sure they already proved it to us. I'm pretty sure we were waiting for them to do it, but they already jumped right out of the gate in the first couple laps and have already been doing it the draft. With these high downforce cars, you're going to have a lot of this draft, and especially when you build up the momentum out of the corners, you can gather some of that draft off of each turn, each short shoot, and then bring it all the way up to the front and back straightaways. We see it usually with the Indy cars and how much they can develop a run with those IR18 bodies, but even in the Cup cars, they still make a huge difference into how positions get decided and how you can try to make a move going on either straightaway just using that draft to your advantage.
Yeah, you really have a strong pull when that car is punching a hole. Right there you see Brian M. Smith being the race leader. He's punching a hole for every single car behind him, so they have less resistance to the air, which allows the car to just go faster naturally since there's no wind really hitting it that hard. It's just nothing is there to hit the rear spoiler, and that's good on the straightaways, but that's not really that good for the corners because you need that downforce in the corners to really make cornering speed. So when you're this close behind Brian M. Smith in the corners, you're going to struggle. But right here, watch as the entire back straightaway, he's starting to close the gap. You can physically see just how close he's getting, but he's not going to be able to make a move quite yet. But you do this for a good bit of laps, and eventually you'll start closing in on the back bumper and maybe set up a pass. But I'm noticing here that Dalton Tucker, that little hood flap right there on the right side, it looks to be a little bit damaged. I'm not sure if he may have made a little bit of contact with somebody or the wall, but that is something to note, that perhaps a little bit of contact resulted in a little bit of damage early on.
Yeah, we saw him, as we were riding on board, had a little bit of a meeting with the outside wall as he was trying to arc for turn 3. You saw a bit of the damage get crinkled on the right side, so we'll see whether that affects him aerodynamically. Again, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, Dalton Tucker, the winner last week at the Richmond Raceway, pretty much went for a dominating race win up until about the halfway mark of the race where caution came out, kind of threw the entire field out of order, but nonetheless Tucker was able to come back through the field and then lead the laps all the way into the very end and captured his first win this season in his first start. So already in his second start in this series, putting the pressure to one that they would call a veteran, one of the better drivers, one of the more skilled drivers in this series, Brian M. Smith, who already has 2 race wins to his resume. We just have not seen him carry at least the bright side of luck that has been occurring to him over the past couple of weeks. Seems as though the luck really hasn't been there for him. I don't believe he showed up last week, so it's a good thing that we're seeing him back on the racetrack as we complete lap number 7. Go to lap number 8. Here's a nice battle and almost contact there. That's Jacob Smith and Tyler B. Murray. Remember, Tyler Murray tied in the point standings right now with Scott Healy for that final spot in the Championship 5. So Tyler Murray, after what was Richmond last week, he definitely needs a good run, and now he's under pressure from multiple drivers, including Reedy and now Edward Schur to the inside.
And you mentioned he's battling Scott Healy. Scott Healy started way deep in the field, but he's made his way up to the 4th position. He's in that top 5 group right now. There you see him right there behind Kyle Benson. So Scott Healy has quietly made his way up through the field. And if this pace is anything to show, if we get a restart here rather soon, he could be a challenge for these leaders, because as these tires wear, it's going to be progressively more difficult to make passes, and the draft is going to start making less of a difference as far as being able to close on somebody. You see Mons right there just pushing him on the straightaway, get him a little loose, but it's going to work in the 64's favor as the 41 has to back off in order to get a little bit of clean air. But have you noticed, Kenneth, that this top 5 group is sort of giving each other a little bit of space? They have to sort of watch their tires because they're going to wear extremely with that really high track temperature of 115 degrees that you mentioned before this race. And you see the other group back here, they're also a pretty good ways behind this main group, but they're also giving each other a little bit more space than they would on a restart because these tires are wearing, and that's making the cars a lot more difficult.
I definitely did notice that, Francisco. The fact that Justin Mons, who's at the edge of the top 5, they have already seemed to walk over, or at least walk away from everybody else, but I guess that's not going to be faring for long as the caution weighs for the first time tonight, and it might have involved these two right here. You saw Connor E. Cunningham down pit road in the 19th spot. Brandon Gillis with heavy damage on his front end in P18. We're going to try to see exactly where this began, how this all started. But actually, you see him around here, coming to the back straightaway. Actually, there was contact with the outside wall. Got a little bit tight. You see even already damage to his Toyota Camry before the incident happened, Francisco. But it was just a compounding factor of hitting the outside wall, going straight into Connor Cunningham, and a big slam to the inside tire barrier, surely to end his day.
Yeah, you have to feel bad for Cunningham there. Just an innocent bystander slamming the inside wall. That sort of reminds you of the crash that Brad Keselowski had here not too many years ago when he hit that tire barrier and got on his side, doesn't it, Kenneth? But a wild ride for him, and unfortunately for Gillis, also a big incident. He already had that right side damage, which helped him get tight in that corner when he was around the middle of the racetrack, which you do not want to do at a track like Indianapolis. So it was definitely a compounded factor of the damage, running the line that he was, and probably already having a tight condition to his race car. So unfortunate for both those drivers, but I do think they have the fast repair, so their night is not entirely over.
They do have the fast repair, but Cunningham did elect for the tow, so that's going to spend him a lot more time down pit road. I believe Brandon Gillis is still on track, so we are still able to have him get a fast repair. Actually, he already burned it off, so he's already down pit road and actually exiting pit road as he goes for the exit of turn 2. Going to catch up with the rest of this field. Meanwhile, Brian M. Smith has led the entire field down for early yellow flag pit stops at lap number 11. So already fairly early on the call here, Francisco. I'm assuming 4 tires and fuel are going to set them off.
Yeah, remember that Indianapolis is a big racetrack, and with the fuel fill that they'll have here for today's race, their fuel window is most likely somewhere between 27 to 30 laps. So it's not that long of a fuel window. So this is about a third of the run. Of course, they'll use this caution as an opportunity to come on in, and they see Brian M. Smith maintain the lead off pit road. Justin Mons struggling to get off. He loses a couple of positions.
He's going to lose a bunch of spots. I think I saw Scott Healy lose a lot of spots as well. So lengthened pit stop. You see him, the black and yellow Chevrolet Camaro, just exiting the shot. He's going to be behind Cody Ivey near the outside of the top 10. So very quick, a very long stop there. It was about a 14.6 second stop for Healy, but I'm not sure whether he was staying down pit road for some damage or whether he was just ensuring that he can stay at the back of the field, maybe save something. Not entirely sure what the motive is there, as he had a relatively long stay down pit road and lost all those positions. So Brian M. Smith going to catch up to the iRacing pace car. We'll have, of course, a restart within about 2 laps or so. We'll hope to see the green flag rather soon. And one of the massive updates that just came with the iRacing season build that came out today on Wednesday, June 9th, one of the more efficient rules for the officials is that they can try and minimize the amount of laps that you run under yellow. So let's say everybody pits, let's say nobody's going to pit or whatever may have you, whatever circumstance there is, you can add or shorten the amount of pace laps that you do under yellow. So let's say that they can shorten it down to 1, we can get the 1 to green signal now, or we can get it a little bit later, depending on what race control and the admins decide to do. I think that's a very nice thing here, Francisco, because in tracks over 2 miles long, I don't think these drivers really want to stay behind the pace car all too long.
I think that's a great feature, Kenneth. I mean, you see right there, they are getting double wide, so they're on 1 to green right now. So I really like this update because let's say a short track, you can it's been known to have a pretty lengthy yellow, so you can sort of hurry it on up and maybe not waste a lap or 2 that you would have under caution and get back racing. So it really does provide the opportunity to get more green flag racing in, and when the cautions are rather extensive for once everybody's caught up, that's very noticeable mainly at the short tracks, and obviously at these big speedways you don't want to waste an extra lap because of how long it takes to complete the lap. But there's been several new things with these updates, including obviously track parameters changed for Las Vegas and Martinsville. Las Vegas having a little bit more multi-group action. Nashville Super Speedway has been released to the public, and probably my favorite of all the features, Kenneth, and I'm a big advocate for it. The Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, Austria has been released. My favorite course in the entire service has been added to it. So I'm very excited for that one. I've turned a lot of laps in it already, and I just can't wait to get on with it.
You know, if somebody looked at it from a first glance, saw 65 laps, you think they would think that you love that track so much. So definitely putting in the grind for the track, I can see. And of course, very excited for all the new stuff going to come up with the new content. And of course, a lot of the new updates coming on the iRacing service. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Las Vegas for the rest of this season. So guess we'll maybe have to wait till next season or another chance to find that out with the track parameters as well as Martinsville. Meanwhile, we're ready to get back under the green flag. Lap 13 of 80. It'll be Brian M. Smith and Dalton Tucker. Your grid lock from the first row to start this race just reversed as Brian M. Smith going to be the control car to the inside. Pace car going to make its way down low to the front straightaway. They'll head and for the auto bricks. So cross as Brian M. Smith will take the green flag once more.
And a good start for him. He's going to get clear before turn 1. And something that probably doesn't get talked about, Kenneth, is that it's very tricky to time the restarts at Indianapolis because you have such a long front straightaway and the start-finish line is very far towards turn 1 than it is the center of the straightaway. The restart zone, it feels like it takes ages to get there, so it's very hard for the rest of the field to sort of time the restart once the leader gets going because it's just such a long drive you have to go before actually getting to the general zone that it makes it very difficult to try and beat him.
Right now, you're seeing this three-car trio as Dalton Tucker tries to run away with the leader, Brian M. Smith. There's Kyle Benson, the 11 of Austin Reedy, and the 20 of Edward Shore. We saw him currently on a streak of 2 consecutive top 3 finishes, looking for that 3rd consecutive top 3 finish here tonight in Indianapolis. We've seen him run that infamous, I think at this point, Rowdy and ally Alex Bowman scheme on his Chevrolet Camaro. So right now trying to tail behind Austin Reedy for the top 5 and maybe look to make a move. We saw a lot of aggression early on in the first couple laps of this race, and I think it's toned down just a little bit after the first round of pit stops under our first yellow. So mostly everybody's single file, albeit some battles behind the field, but there was a caution as well. And again, Brandon Gillis involved, but even more so, playoff contender Christopher Bishop is involved in the second caution of the night.
We just had to mention it, didn't we? As soon as we said the single file, we cut away, and the yellow flag involved with Christopher Bishop, a playoff driver. That's going to be big, Kenneth. And you saw Brandon Gillis also involved. He used his fast repair already. You see Cody Ivey there actually had an incident right there and goes up and into the wall. Goes spinning down the racetrack right in front of Christopher Bishop, who had nowhere to go. And then a double whammy there. And Brandon Gillis. Unfortunate there. But you saw one of these drivers also go by and had a really close call further back trying to avoid it behind Gillis. So that was close margins for several of these drivers getting by these wrecks. A couple of onboard shots would show just how close they were. Let's ride on board here with Connor Cunningham.
You'll see it here. You see that yellow Ford Mustang all the way, the tiny speck in your screen. He's already going around, so the caution is already about being thrown here. You see Bishop coming back up the track, collects Brandon Gillis. And Cunningham able to skate away from that also, I think, along with Pete Bruni. Ricky Rosner also got away from that as well. So good for them to stay out of it. I believe Nicholas Fizzuti, Craig Lonsarger, 2 playoff drivers, they also got out of it as well. So that's good news for them that they don't have to waste a fast repair as they won't have damage. For Christopher Bishop, though, we saw him come into this race. He is 11 points shy of the cutoff right now. So certainly for the 42, that is not going to help. He did not take that fast repair, at least just yet. Not sure whether he's going to wait until later in this race. Francisco, go ahead.
He's going to have to. I mean, he has no front clip on that car, and the rear end is very damaged, Kenneth. He's definitely going to have to take that fast repair.
We'll see if he does. We've seen drivers with damage like this before take fast repairs late in the race, but pretty sure the 42 is already going to be looking down a pit road. Indeed, there he'll go, but a couple more drivers going to take their trips down pit road. A bit of a split here. Dalton Tucker, Austin Reedy, Tyler Murray, Tyler Warner. A lot of these drivers going to step down pit road for the second time tonight. in the first split decision of the evening. So I think here, Francisco, rather interesting call for guys like Tucker, even for playoff drivers like Warner. You see the 75 of Azuti, Roman Long, Tyler Murray, all these guys going for fresh tires, maybe in search for some extra points with that at track position.
And so it begins, the split strategies, and Indianapolis, ever so favorite of those type of strategies in these races. We see it every single time we come to this racetrack, no matter what vehicle you're in. And you saw 6, 7 cars there stayed out, so track position will be on their side, despite the fact that they ran about 4 or 5 laps under the green flag that time. But new tires do matter here. You see these long sweeping corners that carry a lot of speed and are very flat. That really hurts that right front tire when you have 4 separate corners that are just like that. So maybe those tires will make a difference and be able to slice their way through the field, use the draft to their advantage, and try to get back to the front of the field and then assert themselves in the track position if we get a caution later on.
Well, certainly if we do get a caution later on, I don't think it's going to hurt these guys for much because like we mentioned before in this series, there are no tire sets. So there's no strategy with the amount of tire sets you have on the racetrack. You have infinite tire sets, so you can go down pit road as many times as you want. You're not limited to the amount of tires that you do have on pit road. So this is going to be good for them, and I think in any case, obviously as long as they don't get involved in a caution or they don't get wrecked themselves, this is going to be beneficiary for them because let's say a long green flag run happens, they can stay out a little bit longer, take advantage of these guys who had just stayed out, who are going to have to pit a little bit earlier, or if a caution comes out, then the leaders go down pit road, these guys can go down pit road as well, and they'll all just be on equal footing once more. So I think I really like this strategy here if you're these guys, especially if you're Tyler Murray and at least the 75 Azudi, the 14 of Roman Long. A lot of these guys who need points, or at least want those points to get up into the championship 5, either if they're already there to gain more position, or if they're behind the cutoff to gain some of those points and shorten the gap. I think that's going to be very imperative once we move forward here.
Yeah, but as we've known with these races, Kenneth, we never know when the cautions are going to come out, and we don't know exactly which strategy will work out, and that's why we're here. We're here to watch it with everybody who's watching along in the YouTube stream tonight, and we're just here to bring it to them as best as we possibly can. So we have this front row of Brian M. Smith and Kyle Benson. Those two have been very competitive with one another, always battling up front. Brian M. Smith, very selective with the races he's been a part of, but when he is here, he's always a threat to be reckoned with. Winner of Las Vegas, he also won at the Daytona Road Course. Kyle Benson won the Charlotte Road Course for his only win of the season to this point. But regardless of that, Kenneth, these two are definitely two of the strongest drivers of the season. They're going to lead us to the green flag. Dalton Tucker back in the 8th position. He's going to be the first driver on fresh tires. So I'm interested to see just how this works out here, Kenneth. I feel like it's going to be a stampede going into 1 and 2.
It may indeed be one, but the tire stretch isn't necessarily that far apart. It's only about, I'd say, 6 to 5 laps in that sort of range. So it will help these guys, but we'll see whether they'll get held up by everybody up front. We'll just have to see. Pace car going to go back down pit road. We'll have our second restart of the evening, lap number 18 of 80, so a long way to go here at the Brickyard. The 78 of Brian M. Smith once again going to be the controlled car. He'll go down the front straightaway, step on the gas, we're back under green. A nice start for him as they head back to turn number 1, but an even better one by the 20 of Edward Schur. He's already going to dive underneath Kyle Benson as they head back to the first short shoot of the racetrack in the first half of the racetrack. To the inside it would go, a little bit of a slide out of the 26 of Jacob Smith behind them, but so far, most everybody too wide as Brian M. Smith tries to pull away.
He does have a pretty good lead, and Kyle Benson having to defend from Edward Scherner behind him. There you see the 55 of Dalton Tucker making a move to the bottom side of the racetrack, almost making contact there, but he is trying to make up positions as best as he can. Scott Healy there going to the inside of Justin Monsby on one way up the racetrack and actually gets the wall on the exit of turn 3.
Jacob Smith, we saw him loose going into turn number 1, got a little tight to the short shoe in 3 and 4. He does not tag the wall, and he stays clean, although just a little bit of damage. You see Scott Healy now getting pushed by the 52 of Dalton Tucker. Not anymore. Tucker gonna ride with Justin Mons as they head back to turn number 1. And at this point, if you're Dalton Tucker on these fresh tires, you kind of don't want to risk it, but even more of a risk up front. And what a save by the 41 of Justin Mons. Got tagged by Scott Healy on the way there, and he was able to maintain straight, almost more contact once more as they head out of 2.
Incredible car control from Justin Mons, and around they go. Tyler Murray involved.
Tyler Murray around to the racetrack as they head off to the back straightaway. And again, caution will wave, the third one of the evening and the second involving a playoff competitor. We were talking about it earlier, just possibly the good strategy that these guys could have been on. Tyler Murray was a part of that group. And I think he may have to burn the fast pair with the amount of damage he has on his car. Maybe some help out of turn 2. We'll try to see exactly what happened going to that segment of the racetrack. You'll see it here coming off turn 2. Him and Roman Long run side by side. Oh, and it was Roman Long, I think, a little bit just got loose. We'll try to get an aerial shot here. You'll see right about here to the banking to the straightaway. You see the 14, a little bit of a step out, but you see the 8 also come up the track. They both get collected. Roman Long, also another playoff driver. And then Tyler Murray at this point, nowhere to go as he's a passenger.
Yeah, it looks like they both were just coming towards one another. The 14 getting a little bit loose off the corner, trying to turn down away from the wall. The 8 was loose in the corner, in the center of the corner, and sort of caught the car and was drifting up the racetrack just a little bit. But both of those things combined resulted in that contact and the spinning of Tyler Murray. So that did also halt the progress of Dalton Tucker, who did make his way into the top 5 there, and given enough time, he could have passed a couple more cars and perhaps gotten himself into the lead battle. But that will have to wait, and we'll see just who decides to come down pit road this time. Do the people who stayed out under the last yellow come in this time, and those who stayed out, or those that came in, stay out now? Or do they all come in, or do they all stay out?
We'll just have to see, but many of them looking to indicate that they'll go down pit road. As for now, I think only a handful of takers, and Kyle Benson will be one of them. At least most of the field deciding to go down pit road, as it'll be Benson, Tucker, Mons, Lautensager, Reedy, Long, Warner, Pete Bruni, Ivy. You see a little bit further back, I believe that's Ricky Rosner, Connor Cunningham, and of course Tyler B. Murray, who got involved in that recent yellow. So many of these drivers now, I think another different split here, Francisco, because we have some drivers that went down pit road that last caution by, and then some of them that did not. So maybe the first time they take, and for Kyle Benson, that's the first time he's going to do it in this race so far.
And there you see most of the field is down pit road, and notably Brian M. Smith did stay out again. So well, some other of these guys, Kyle Benson winning the race off pit road. There you see Tucker, and there you see Craig Lautensager moving his way up on this strategy. Mons falling down a little bit relative to those, but on this back straightaway here, you see another 7 or so cars did stay out once again. Notably, Brian M. Smith.
Yeah, Brian M. Smith has not taken his turn down pit road just yet. I think he's waiting and at least hoping that a long green flag run can come out of it, and then he'll probably make his decision. Or if yellows come out, he can still make that decision and go down pit road. He's probably going to lose track position on the way there, but fresh tires are probably going to mean a lot more in the grand scheme of things. So Brian Smith, 2 race wins this season, one of the Daytona road course earlier in a Chevrolet, and of course got the win in a 78, or the 19. It was a Martin Truex Jr. paint scheme, not the 78. It was the Bass Pro Shops 19 machine, and he got the win at Las Vegas. Before the playoffs began, he has yet to reach victory lane since. He's been rather close, Francisco, but again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the luck really hasn't been on his side, whether it be small mistakes, whether it be some cautions, and then he just decides to leave, and he doesn't necessarily want to keep racing in the race anymore. So maybe looking for that third one, and I think if he's still up front, if he's got all that clean air, it may end out well for him, at least at this point.
Yeah, and if we do have a rash of cautions for Brian M. Smith, why not stay out and lead all these laps? And then at a certain point, when you have to for fuel or for tires, you can make it to the end, you can come down pit road. So it's interesting if depending on how this plays out, because if we have a rash of cautions, it works out. But if we do get a long green flag run, those tires will eventually show their worth.
Well, we'll see how the guys on fresh tires will do. We saw Dalton Tucker, Kyle Benson, who are the first drivers, going to be on fresh tires here in this pack. They are 7th and 8th. Of course, every driver who took tires, went down pit road, are lined up behind them. We'll have an outside line start here by Brian M. Smith. So, although we saw him take the inside line to jump the field off, he's going to choose the outside here with Edward Scher to the bottom of the racetrack. Countless times we see the race leader just pull away, able to get the start over everybody else, clear themselves to turn 1. I figure regardless of which lane Brian M. Smith chooses, he's going to be okay as long as he can nail this restart. A little bit of damage, though, to Edward Scher, so we're trying to see how that worked forward. I think a little bit of damage in the pack may have accrued that, because you see just how people can check up throughout the short shoots, and, of course, with Jacob Smith, who went up to the outside wall, maybe slowed things down. We'll just have to see as they move forward. So we're still about, I said, 58 laps away from the end of this race. Like she says, we're still about 52 minutes out. So that is, of course, if we stay under the green flag all the way till the end. We haven't had a long green flag run just yet. The only one was to start this race up until lap, I'd say about lap 10, lap 11. And we'll see if we got a longer green flag run to set us up for the rest of this race and find out if any other pit strategy call works for the drivers who went down pit road that last caution by. Pace car gonna make its way down. Brian M. Smith with a push from Jacob Smith, and a little bit of a stacked restart there as Edward Scher was kind of confused on when to go there. The 78 gonna get the jump. Edward Scher, though, gonna have a push from Scott Healy as they head back to 1.
And that goes back to what we were talking about on the last restart. You have such a long way to go before you get to the actual restart zone, where it just causes this stack up towards the latter rows of the field, trying to guess when to go or trying to help the car in front of you. Contact between Scherner, and they're going to work that out. But here comes now Scott Healy trying to make a move, and Kyle Benson.
Kyle Benson and Scott Healy, there they go, to the drivers battling for position and for points in the 4 Wide Cup Series playoffs. Benson on the fresh tires, going to work down low. Doesn't seem to be too big of an advantage. But Benson going to go to the inside and take that position away. So move the 4 car up to P4 and moving continuously forward to up this field as you run on board.
And Jacob Smith was able to get himself into the 2nd spot. Brian M. Smith is pulled away, but we'll have to see, does Kyle Benson make these tires work? And if he does, just how quickly can he make it work? You see right now stuck behind those 2 in front of him, and Dalton Tucker starting to close the gap to him. So these 2 guys are on tires. We'll have to see, do they work together to get through, to get to your race leader, or will they eventually battle each other? And they very well could, just considering how much Kyle Benson's getting held up here.
And you can see just how patient you have to be even when you're on the fresh tires. And I know this isn't really a big of a difference in terms of the tires, because you're only about 5 to 6 laps, maybe even less on that run. So it's not like it's going to be a dramatic improvement on the lap times, or at least on the pace significantly. But you see now Benson going to work to the inside. You're going to have to carry a little more patience as you're with these drivers ahead, because you're not as quick on the fresh rubber, but at the same time, here in Indianapolis, you do not really want to be side by side through the short shoots and through these corners, because you do not want to be either on the outside or the inside. Your car can get tight. You don't want to make contact. You don't want to make a small mistake. I think the good thing for Kyle Benson is he's going to get clear of all of that and move the 4 machine up to 3rd.
I think the most namely situation that you can think of, drivers who don't want to be on the inside of someone or on the outside of someone, comes on the infamous restart in 2017 when Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Busch took each other out in turn 1. Truex on the inside got loose and corrected it into the left rear of Kyle Busch, and that just goes to show that stuff like that can happen here. Benson loose there, as we saw, almost contact a little bit further behind him, and now he's going to make the move here, trying to make the move on Jacob Smith for the 2nd spot. But when you're side by side like that in the corners, stuff like that is capable. An aggressive block to the inside, almost to the pit wall.
And he's going to block him all the way there. No space for Benson. That's only going to hold him up. And Scott Healy going to have a push from Dalton Tucker to move them about 2 by 2, 3 rows deep as they head back to turn 1. A bit of a wobble into Dalton Tucker. And Tucker goes into the outside wall. He'll head back for the inside. But a good save. No caution will wave. Even though there's damage to the 52 machine, he'll stay to the access road, stay clear of everybody's way. Now Austin Reedy pushing it 3 wide.
And that started a lap ago when Kyle Benson got a good run on Jacob Smith and tried to go for the move on him, and he blocked him all the way down the racetrack, and it allowed everybody else to just go up to the outside and get by them both. And I guess Kyle Benson wasn't too happy about that, was trying to get to the rear bumper of Jacob Smith, and in doing so made contact with the 52, and that has really put a damper on the race of Dalton Tucker, who was able to save it, but no caution has come out, and he has significant damage to his car.
And he's going to get put all the way back to 18th as you see him go down pit road. We see only one driver pulled behind the garage. That is the 9 of Brandon Gillis.
Yeah.
And for Dalton Tucker, I think his night is for sure over, as he's going to pull it behind the garage. And I don't think he was very happy with that incident at the front of this field. As we're going into turn number 1, you see Jacob Smith now getting hounded by practically everybody in this field. That was Edward Schur who made the move down low. Now here comes Justin Mons. How about Craig Launsager putting himself into the picture as well? Craig Launsager, as mentioned, one of the playoff drivers going into tonight. And a little bit of a tough position there. Almost got a little bit tight there as the 26 was almost about pinching him through turn 3. But him, Launsager, the winner at Iowa earlier this year, a driver that has consistent momentum. He's about 3 points shy of the playoff race lead, or the playoff lead. I think he's going to want some significant points here if he wants to jump start on Kyle Benson in the next couple races.
Yeah, but if he wants to try and close the gap to Kyle Benson, he's got to try doing something different. There you see Brian Smith, who's just pulled away from the field, and he's trying to make sure that he can get clear of the draft gap that he can build so that they can't draft to catch him. But Kyle Benson right now is starting to work his way into that second position, and as long as there's enough green flag laps left before the following caution that will before this run ends, then he'll get into that second position at the very least. And Craig Launsager is a little bit further down the field, so he has some work to do if he wants to catch up to that Kyle Benson. But his ultimate goal, especially after having to use that fast repair a little bit earlier, because he did get a little bit of wall damage, that he's going to have to try and secure as many points as he can to still build that cushion to 6th.
And you see right now, this is the battle for second at the moment. Brian M. Smith has pulled away about a second and a half from everybody behind. I think that's going to be the good news for Brian M. Smith, continuing to pull away from the field while also having that clean air to your advantage and just letting them do the business for you. You don't have to worry about going side by side or being pounced on by any of the drivers behind, because these guys will just fight themselves or fight for position amongst themselves while Smith will be able to pull away. You see Justin Mons now, he's going to put himself into the picture. He's also on the same strategy as Kyle Benson and Austin Reedy. So all of these guys have about 10 lap fresher tires than Brian M. Smith. So this could definitely help in catching up to him, but clean air obviously going to be king. As I think now the gap has shortened to about a second and a tenth or so, 1.1 seconds as they complete lap 30 with about 50 laps to go.
Remember, these drivers right here took tires on this last restart, so they'd have better tires than the race leader, and at the same time, Benson isn't trying to necessarily pass Austin Reedy. He gets right to his bumper and sort of pushes him down these straightaways, and that is helping them catch your race leader. But actually, there you see Justin Mons trying to look to the inside of Kyle Benson. That's going to get them racing with one another. And look at Austin Reedy start pulling away from those two.
But a quick move here, textbook pass by the 41 of Justin Mons, so he'll slip into the top 3. I think Benson put that mindset that you said right there, Francisco. Just, you don't really want to battle with him. Just kind of ride with him and catch up to the race leader, which is exactly what they're doing right now. Austin Reedy now hounding on the back bumper of Brian M. Smith, and sooner than later we may see one of our first passes or one of our first lead changes of tonight's action under the green flag. Apart from the first couple laps, he ran on board with Austin Reedy. Last time by, about a full second faster than the driver up front.
And the move's going to come right here. Look at him staying much lower on the racetrack than the 78 with those newer tires. Brian Smith is going to try to block. Almost get a little bit of contact there, actually. And look at this block by the 78. To the outside goes Austin Reedy. They'll be side by side going into turn 3. The 11 has the advantage. Going into turn 3, he'll take the lead on the outside.
He's going to have all that grip to the 9.2 degree banking. And now it's about what Justin Mons and Kyle Benson can do. Benson's going to force the issue down low for third. And I think they may stall them out a little bit too much as they head back to turn 1. Though Austin Reedy, your current race leader, as they complete lap number 31. No momentum there for Benson to consider as they head back to 1. So Justin Mons going to have a shot at him. And you can see it right there, Francisco. I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, just how big of a difference the tires play. And I'm pretty sure Brian M. Smith has that experience to win at Las Vegas in that strategy, using fresh tire power to cycle back to the race lead. definitely helped him in this case, but they're
Look
going to
at
be
this.
3 wide. 2 Ford Mustangs with a Camry up top as Kyle Benson tries to take 2 for 1.
This reminds you of Brad Keselowski, Casey Kane, and Jimmy Johnson. Who's going to come out ahead of this one? Going into 3, Brian M. Smith will back out, and Benson will retake the position over the 41 of Justin Mons, trying to make sure that he is clear, and he will get the position over him. But all of this is allowing Austin Reedy to pull away, and Scott Healy starting to close in the ground. And there you see Craig Lonsonger, who has made that work, and he's starting to catch up to the back end of this top 5. So soon enough, he will be seeing the people he has to be racing against.
And again, just doing the bidding up front, allowing the guys behind to start reeling and reeling them in. This is going to be very big in the playoff picture. Remember, Scott Healy, as we mentioned at the top of the show, he is tied for 4th in the point standings with Tyler Murray. Driver in front of him is a driver sitting in 8th, Nicholas Rizzuti. Still a good amount of points, though, that Scott Healy can gain, the 2-time short track winner this season. One at Dover and one at Phoenix in a dominating fashion. The 64 trying to catch up and pick up on those positions that is currently being held by Justin Mons and Brian M. Smith. So Mons going to duck down low once more. Now here comes Scott Healy to the inside. But at this point now, Francisco, does this pose a concern if you're the 78 of Brian Smith? Because you chose not to pit within the first handful of cautions. Now these guys have their fresh tires, and now you're sort of on an alternate strategy with a green flag run incoming. So do you start to worry about your length on the racetrack with the amount of fuel you have?
This is always the concern when you start doing these split strategies, because you're not sure which one's going to work, especially when you think you might have a rash of yellows and you decide to stay out. But if the run does go green, and at this point it looks like it could stay that way for at least a little bit longer, considering the amount of field spread we have. There you see Craig Lonsonger getting aggressively blocked almost into the 64 of Scott Healy. They'll be side by side for that position, trying to get by the 78 of Brian Smith, but they're going to settle that one out, at least for now, as a crossover there by the 13. But if you're the 78, you've already dug your bed here. You're into this strategy. Now you have to sort of manage your race from this perspective. You've gone down to the 4th position. You have older tires. If a caution comes out right now, everyone's going to come down pit road. But if this run stays green, you're going to have to pit before everybody else. And knowing so, you're going to have to maximize it. If I remember correctly, he pitted somewhere in the mid, around like lap 16, lap 17. I could be wrong, or maybe he hasn't pitted at all. I think he pitted the first caution at the very earliest for sure. So, at worst case scenario, Kenneth, he may have to come down pit road within the next 10 laps, and if that's the case, he might be a little bit short on making it on just that one stop. So not only is this strategy not viable with him for the tires, but he might have to pit twice, while the rest of these guys can pit once if this were to go green flag the rest of the way.
And the only pit stop that Brian M. Smith made tonight was on that first caution, and it was at about lap 10, lap 11. So he's on a 24, I believe, now crossing the line. He's about 25 laps on his stint as he's going to cross the line. One driver that is also 25 laps on his stint is a driver you're riding on board with right now, the 64 of Scott Healy. He also pitted with Brian M. Smith when the first caution waved, but for each and every other caution after, he has not gone down pit road. So I don't think Brian M. Smith is going to be alone on this adventure here, Francisco, because Scott Healy may be on his way to pit road soon within the next 10 to 15 laps if Brian M. Smith chooses to do so.
I think Healy pitted at least in another caution. I do recall seeing him exit pit road, at least in one of those latter cautions. But regardless of that, at the moment, we're approaching the halfway point in this race, and the strategy is starting to show itself just how it's playing out. And the race hasn't gotten any easier for these guys. The track temperature has increased since the start of the race. It's over 122 degrees right now on the racetrack, so very warm. And you see that wind blowing over 11 miles an hour, so very difficult conditions down on the racetrack, and it's not getting any easier.
And you see right there, the air temperature went up a degree. It was 78 degrees when we started this race. It's now 79. And, of course, the track temperature going to get a lot hotter. Indianapolis, known for its hot summers, in Indiana. And, of course, obviously they don't necessarily run, or they actually do run the Brickyard 400 in the middle of the summer. So that does pose for hot track temperatures. And I think these drivers can take some notes maybe from what was the Brickyard 400 and is now the Indianapolis road course race that we'll have later this year. So far, though, Austin Reedy continues to lead this race. As we cross over to the halfway mark of tonight's event. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back, but you won't miss a thing here on MaxSpeedTV. You're watching the 2021 4Wide Cup Series playoffs from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
We've been waiting for this moment. Generations of innovation all coming together in one place. A pedigree of more than 70 years of NASCAR Cup Series history, from the past to the present, from Petty to Earnhardt to Elliott. Today, there's no more waiting. The future of NASCAR is now. Drive the next-gen cars today on iRacing and step into the next generation of racing.
Back live for the virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway. 40 laps underway here in the second playoff race of the 2021 4Wide Racing Cup Series. This is your current leader, Austin Riddy. His 11 Chevrolet Camaro took the lead about 20 laps back, and he has not set foot, or at least has not looked back since. He's been walking away from second place. Kyle Wentz in third place. Justin Mons. Had a couple drivers down pit road at about the halfway mark. That does include Tyler Murray, Edward Scher, Jacob Smith, Brian M. Smith. They've also taken their trips down pit road. I think we've yet to see Scott Healy step down. Roman Long, playoff driver, also has made his way down pit road. So as we're about at the halfway mark of tonight's race, we'll take a look at your current race summary, see exactly how things have unfolded over the first 40 laps of this race. Of course, 40 laps to go. Once we cross the stripe, or at least it'll be 39 laps to go. We've had 3 quick yellows for 9 caution laps. We've only had 2 lead changes on the racetrack. A lot of them happening in the first lap of this race, and of course the second one happening with Austin Riddy taking it over. And of course, he has yet to rescind that race lead. So now, at this point, Francisco, we saw it under break. Couple drivers have made their way down pit road, most notably some playoff runners, and of course, Brian M. Smith, who was dominating the first portion of this race. How does this situate itself out? Because now we've had our first stops of the evening, and we're probably in our way for the first full green flag cycle of tonight's race as well.
And this is crucial, Kenneth, because I was talking to you about this just in that break, that if these guys that are pitting now are going to have to pit again before the end of this race, they just don't have enough fuel to really go the entire distance. If you want to make it to the end of the race, the earliest you can probably pit and make it is around lap 46, and that's even cutting it close. Realistically, you want to try and make it to lap 50, and if you pitted on the most recent caution that came out around lap 20, you probably have the best chance at making it towards lap 50, in which you can split the end of the race in 30-30. And even that is going to be rather difficult with the fuel fill that we have for tonight, around 75%. That's sort of my take on that. But I could be wrong. That is more or less the estimate that I'm able to give to the best of my knowledge.
Oh yeah, we're certainly going to see these drivers go down pit road at least before this is all said and done. We saw Brian M. Smith pit around, and I'm guessing his lap 28 to 30 mark before he decided to finally go for fuel, and he wasn't going to go any longer. Right now, most of the drivers within the top 5 are about their 22 lap runs. Scott Healy, I think, is the only one that has extended this one at about 32 laps. You're riding on board. Usually you'd see drivers coast around this point, but I don't think for Scott Healy he's been doing such, at least in that Nacer. You run on board with him. This is going into turn 3. You see him going to get this draft. We'll listen to the in-car camera. No signs of clutching and coasting to save some of that fuel. So I think Healy going to try to go for the distance, or maybe under the yellows he also tried to save fuel, maybe clutch it close while they were going very slow, and could allow for some extra laps. But I don't think there's going to be any more extra laps, as finally Scott Healy going to step down pit road. I think this will be the best situation for him. He won't necessarily lose too many positions, but there will go Tyler Warner and Nicholas Suzuki, 2 playoff drivers, Francisco, that I don't believe we mentioned too much here tonight.
You haven't, but this is a crucial time for the Scott Healy pit stop because it shows a lot. First, he went about 32 laps, as you mentioned, and that's around that mark that I was recently talking about. Another thing, he's pitting on lap 44. That means there's about 36, 37 laps to the end of the race. You may have to save fuel, and this being a big track, it's going to be very hard to try and save 5 laps worth of fuel. But now turn to the race leaders who still have not come down pit road, looking at your top 5, 6, or 7 or so drivers. I believe actually the top 10 have not come down pit road yet. Brian M. Smith is first of those drivers who have come down pit road already. So looking at those top 10 drivers right now, they have not come down pit road yet. And depending when they do, could determine whether they have to pit one more time in this race or twice in the remaining of the race. For sure, everyone's going to have to pit once, but one less pit stop here could be very meaningful, just given the amount of time you lose. You don't lose a lap, but you definitely lose a lot of time. As you see, for example, Brian Smith, who had pitted several laps ago, is 33.5 seconds behind your race leader. And you do not want to have to make an extra pit stop and be 30 seconds behind the people you're racing in this race.
You definitely don't. That's going to really help if you're going to only need one pit stop. And I think that's going to be the goal for most of these drivers within the top 10, is to try and extend it as far as you can. Maybe get to lap 50, maybe get to lap 60, or maybe lap 55 to 60, to the point where you can pit once and then you'll be at least majorly comfortable to the end of the race and not really have to worry about how long you have to stretch it on fuel. That's going to be the problem there for guys like Brian M. Smith, guys like Tyler Murray, Roman Long. A lot of these drivers that have decided to pit now, they're going to have to stretch it a lot further, and in turn, it's probably going to force them to make another pit stop before this is all said and done, and that may put them even further back on the distance, and it's also going to put them back in track position, which also isn't going to be helpful, considering you want to run for the win in this race, especially if you're a playoff driver needing a lot of these points. Currently on the 25th lap for Austin Reedy. Most of the drivers in the top 5 have that same strategy. Nicholas Suzuki is kind of on an alternate one here with Christopher Bishop, at least for the moment. I think Christopher Bishop did go down pit road, but as for the 75 Suzuki, he's about 28 laps on his stint, so about a 3 to 5 lap difference between himself and the main leaders. I think that's also going to play a part in this race. So at this point now, we have everybody separated. We have a couple drivers a lap down. You see Bishop there in 17th. He's been pulling lap down here tonight. Now it's going to make things even more difficult, because if you are going to try and stretch it, do you risk some of that distance lost in the long run to ensure that you can make it all the way to the end? And then, of course, you have to predict that no yellows come out for the strategy to work.
That's vital right there, the information you gave over that last lap, Kenneth. You're saying that these guys have gone about 27 laps on their run right now. If that is indeed the case, they won't even have to save fuel in order to make it to the end. They can go to the end of their fuel window right now and comfortably make it by at least 2 laps to the end of this race, judging by what we've seen. For example, Scott Healy go 32 laps. So if what you're saying is right, and what we've seen here plays true for the rest of this race, everybody who has not pitted yet in this green flag run will only have to stop once, and drivers like Brian M. Smith will have to use their tire advantage to gain back what they lose by making the extra pit stop. So interesting strategies going on here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Kenneth, and this is playing out exactly how the broadcasters in real life will always say about these big racetracks where you can pit and not lose a lap. You have to run them like a road course, pit the backwards, ensure that you can make it to the end of the race and have as little pit stops as possible.
There's Nicholas Vizzuti coming out of pit road. I think you make a fantastic point there. Treating it like a road course, a lot of these big tracks. There's a lot of other tracks that you can try to put strategy in as well. I mean, talk about Daytona for the first race this season. It came down to the final 15 laps, and that strategy to play out under the green flag for us to decide a winner. Almost the same thing that happened at the Talladega Superspeedway not too long ago. Michigan International Speedway, that also played a factor into the strategy. So a lot of these very big 2-mile and over tracks that really forces the mindset to change here for many drivers. One thing I'm going to notice here is that Austin Reedy has been losing time to the top 3. Kyle Benson and Justin Mons have slowly but surely been reeling him in. So Austin Reedy could possibly be either maybe losing a lot of the grip on his tires, or could possibly be saving some fuel to maybe make it an extra lap. And that could make a difference between him winning and losing this race if it stays green.
Yeah, he probably is not going 100% full throttle right now, and you see him right there. He's just missing the bottom, letting go the 75 of Nicholas Vizzuti, who came out of pit road not too many laps ago. But right now, Kenneth, I think it's a done deal for these guys. If they can come in at any time at this point forward and be able to make it. And as soon as I say that, there comes Kyle Benson.
Kyle Benson now going to step down to pit road. Him and Craig Lonsart are going to do the same, as now they'll try to stretch it all the way to the end of this race. You take a look on the right side of your screen, or at least the left side of your screen. That's the stints everybody's on right now. You see all the zeros for the 4 and the 13. They're down pit road right now. 29 laps, respectively, for the 11 of Reedy, the 41 of Mons, and the 33 of Tyler Warner. Cody Ivey in the 81, also about 28 laps on his stint. I think a little bit of a miss there, right there by Kyle Benson. That may move him a little bit, or that may lose him a little bit of time here. I don't think it'll be too much of a detriment factor to this one, as we're going to be crossing the line to about 30 laps to go. Austin Reedy and Justin Mons may have a tight battle for the race lead if Austin Reedy does not go down pit road, and I believe he will.
Look at this, and Justin Mons is going to jump him.
And a pass down pit road. Can you say you've seen this before? Mons with the race lead going into pit road. A fantastic pass. I believe Reedy may have been running out or just trying to take it easy. But Mons going to take over the race lead at this point. But I think that's going to rescind for now, because Tyler Warner is going to be next to stay out. And he's about 30 laps on his stint as well.
The pass on the pit entry, that reminds me of Sebastian Vettel at China in 2016. And I'm not sure you have seen that clip, Kenneth, but that just reminded me of that. And that was insane, that move he was able to make. It may end up working out for Justin Mons too. That was crucial. I mean, that's going to get him one position over him. And yeah, and it could be very beneficial to Justin Mons, but it could also be very, very detrimental to Austin Reedy. We know Reedy didn't have exactly a great outing at Richmond, and he needs all the points he can get. So maybe he'll be writing that down and keeping that for later, because he knows that maybe he could have pushed it a little bit harder and it wouldn't have given up that position. But right now, once this all cycles, Brian M. Smith will have a big lead, but they'll eventually start catching him, as these guys will now have newer tires. It won't be quite the difference that he had on them, with it being about 20 lap newer tires, but they do have about 10 lap newer tires. So there is an advantage there. And there you see, actually, he has cycled out to the lead as Tyler Warner has come down pit road. And you could just see the big gap that he has to the rest of this field. But he does have to come down pit road at least one more time, Kenneth, and it may be somewhere in the next 15 to 20 laps.
Well, maybe for the 33, this could potentially be a race-saving one if he can stretch it all the way to the end. This, in turn, will give P1 to the 78 of Brian Smith. However, we're probably going to see these two pit a little bit later in this race, like you just mentioned there, Francisco. They're going to go a little bit of a while, but they can't make it all the way to the end, specifically if they want to save as much fuel as possible, or if they even want to make it to the checkered flag. They're going to have to pit at least once. So now, if they're going to pit, and let's say no yellows come out, they're going to have to bank it out on distance to get them to the end. And we've seen it multiple times before where distance has played such a big factor into where drivers end up out of pit road, what positions they lose, and how many positions they can lose before they go back in the fresh tires and they can gain all of them back. So for Brian M. Smith, if you can put this distance now, maybe if you go down pit road, it won't be as big of a blow, and you won't lose as many positions in turn, especially with some other drivers behind you that have also pitted on the same strategy as you and will also have to pit around the same time as you. So it may not be as detrimental for these guys up here if they can make that distance happen, although the distance is about 19 seconds between Smith and Benson.
Yeah, that's basically about half a pit stop. So if this is going to continue to close, and Benson will most likely get close to Brian and Smith by the time Smith has to come down pit road. So depending what the actual gap is and how many laps are left will determine where he'll end up. I don't think Brian and Smith will be able to run him back down once he comes down pit road. I just don't think there's enough laps in the race for him to do that in. But if a caution comes out, Kenneth, that will definitely shake things up.
Yeah, that's really going to shake things up, but I think it's just going to give a big relief to everybody on the mindset, because now, well, at least at that point, if a yellow does come out, that means it's going to structure the field back together, and that means everyone can go down pit road, so everyone's going to have fresh tires, everyone's going to have the amount of fuel left. I think that's also going to be big if we do get a yellow, is the amount of fuel you put in your car, because if you pitted a little bit earlier, you're going to have to put a little bit more, and if you pitted a little bit earlier, or actually if you pitted a little bit later on this stretch, then you can try and fill up the gas tank a little bit, and you won't have to put as much, and it may make a difference in the amount of time you spend down pit road. So maybe for these guys like Kyle Benson, Justin Mons, Launsarger, all these guys on this later strategy, if a yellow does come out, they can put less fuel, they can gain that track position down pit road, and it'll probably help them in the longer run. But nonetheless, it's going to put the field back together. Everyone's going to have fresh tires, and nobody's really going to worry about the fuel fill. So I think on the strategy side, that's going to make things a lot easier. The only problem is, if you're Brian M. Smith with such a big lead, if you're these guys with such a big distance, you don't just want to have it deteriorate in less than a second and have it go all the way back to double file restarts behind the pace car, because I don't really think anyone wants to see that, especially late in this race where chaos can start to come out of the fold.
If I were Brian M. Smith, I would probably come down pit road in the next 5 laps. If a caution comes out, you're in a good position to stay out and take the track position back. And on top of that, your tires won't be all that bad. You have to take advantage of this now before you have to make that second pit stop under the green flag later in the race and maybe get caught out at a bad time. And right now, you wouldn't lose too much time. You'd probably cycle out somewhere around the 13th position and start clawing your way up through the lead lap cars with the better tires, given the fact that almost everybody has pitted about 5 to 8 laps ago. So he's in a good spot right now. If he decides to come down pit road within the next 5 laps, Kenneth, that could be a very good call, even if a caution comes out, because it could still work into his factor, because that opens the door up to if he wants to stay out, if he wants to take 2 tires, because everybody else will most likely be obliged to have to take 4 tires.
There's a big shift for a position right there. That was 2 position lost for the 26 of Jacob Smith, who has some damage on his Ford Mustang. We've seen him gather it over the course of the night, but he's on the same strategy as Brian M. Smith and Scott Healy, respectively. So now that Benson and Mons have gone around, now they can start to catch up, even though it's about 15 seconds between Brian M. Smith and where third place Kyle Benson sits right now, although the gap will start to shorten in. But if you say, Francisco, that these two, or at least for Smith and Healy, that they should go down pit road, is it because you're going to have to hope for a yellow, or is it because they're going to have the fresh tires anyway to catch up to the field, and then does distance also become a concern as well?
Well, here's the thing. You're going to lose about 40 seconds coming down pit road, and you know that you're going to have to pit again, so you may as well get that over with now and use the tires to your advantage and give yourself more laps to use those tires. I think that's what's going to help you win this race, because if you pit at the end of your fuel run, you're giving yourself maybe 10 laps to run down the rest of the field, and you're not going to pass the field in 10 laps. So you pit now, you use the tires to make as much ground as you can, and if a caution comes out, it still works in your favor because you have the option of staying out or doing some 2-tire strategy, and your tires won't be as bad as everyone else's because they'll have to come down pit road since they have older tires than you do. So it really works. It just gives them more options, and a driver like Brian M. Smith is not in the playoffs, so he can afford taking risks like this Scott Healy, he's in the playoffs, but we've seen him be able to perform at many different racetracks. So maybe he can give himself a little bit of leeway and sort of try it out and see if it'll work. So nothing's out of the question right now for those two, but definitely I would consider coming down pit road, especially very soon before a caution comes out and forces everybody to have to pit altogether, and especially if it were to happen right before you pit.
You were watching that, and that's a good point, Francisco, but here's even more interesting because you were watching right there, the two right there, the 41 and the 4, Kyle Benson, Justin Mons, they just lost the position to Craig Launsarger, who's moved up to the 3rd. There goes Jacob Smith to the inside. Remember, these three right here, Launsarger, Mons, and Kyle Benson, they're all on the same strategy, so they're all around the same lap stint, while Jacob Smith is just a little bit more. He's about 19 laps on his stint. He's got older tires, so now we have a situation where these three are starting to save a lot more. Don't believe they're saving fuel, but I believe they're saving tires, saving their equipment for later in this race where they may have to push, because I believe they know that these two up front, or at least these three, are going to have to pit. And there goes Brian M. Smith, your race leader, down a pit road.
And I was just about to say, if they're going to save fuel, he has to come in now, and they're both going to do so. This is exactly what they have to do. They were both locking the tires up, really trying to get the car slowed down. But that's exactly what they have to do, Kenneth. If these three are going to save fuel and try to stretch it, if they don't feel like they're going to be safe to make it, and there goes Jacob Smith down pit road, who also won't be able to make it. But this is the best thing that could have happened. He'll pit early. He gives himself 20 laps to sort of catch them. And if they're not running 100%, that gives himself a good opportunity to make up that ground. So things just got a whole lot more interesting here, Kenneth.
Oh, it's going to make a big difference for the rest of this race. You see Smith still aiming for his pit box there. He's going to hop on the brakes as Scott Healy and Brian M. Smith go up to Jackson. Off of them, they'll go straight out of pit road. Brian M. Smith's going to fall as far as 9th on the racetrack. Actually, now P10 and Christopher Bishop goes by. He's going to have 20 laps here to try and make up as much time as possible. He currently sits about 21 seconds away from who's your current race leader right now, the 13 of Craig Launsarger. Now, this is going to be even bigger here, Francisco, because we talked about Brian M. Smith, we talked about Scott Healy, but these two right here in this top 3, the 4 of Benson and the 13 of Launsarger, these two are playoff drivers, so if you're going to be running up front here with 20 laps to go, this is going to be imperative, especially if you want to win this race, because I know that Kyle Benson, although he's leading the point standings right now in the playoff picture, he's going to want another win in this season after the one at the Charlotte Roval, and he's going to also want a lot more points to give him more comfortability going into Kansas and Kentucky before we get to Charlotte. And Craig Launsarger with 1 win on the year as well, he's going to also want more points to give him an extra shove and possibly give him the points lead. He's only 3 points shy of Kyle Benson coming into tonight.
Crucial. Brian M. Smith is 18 seconds behind this lead group. If they're still saving any fuel, Kenneth, he has the time to catch up to them, and he has the tires to do so. They were running him down roughly about half a tenth to a second a lap when they were just coming out of pit road relative to Brian M. Smith. If he's able to match that, he will get to them by the end of this race. It just matters how the lap cars play a factor here, who he has to pass for position, and how much do these guys save fuel. Because you see, they're getting passed by people who are on older tires. That means they're saving fuel. But according to my calculations, they shouldn't have to save too much fuel, if any, because they pitted with more than enough laps to make it to the end of the race. They split the last run, if you recall. They went about 30 laps, and they pitted with 30 laps to go. So theoretically, Kenneth, they should have enough fuel to make it. But if they don't think they do, that's only going to help Brian M. Smith. And he's actually already closing the gap significantly.
Oh, he is on those fresh tires, but here's an even more important note. The 75 Nicholas Vizzuti, he just passed all 3 of those drivers, and he just took over the race lead. One of the playoff drivers here as well. Vizzuti trying to make a statement here, coming to 18 laps to go from Indianapolis. Maybe he saved enough fuel to go to the end, or maybe he's just looking for that push to separate himself from everybody else and possibly take his 3rd race win of 2021. You see Tyler Warner now getting past Mons and Benson. This is definitely an effort to save, but it's losing them here in the distance-wise, now coming to the final stretch of this race.
And these drivers, Vizzuti, Reedy, and Warner, they all pit just before the group that is saving, so they probably are on the opposite end of the scale. They realize they can't make it, so they're pushing, and there goes actually Reedy into the wall.
Reading to the outside wall. He's going to keep it straight. No yellow. Although that's going to really hamper his aerodynamic effects on his race car. And maybe he'll lose a lot more of these positions as he tries to block Warner going into turn 3. And we'll see how that works. As he almost about had a moment there. That could have brought out a caution as you try to take a look at the replay. There it was. I think him and the 33 of Warner got into the outside wall. You see it here. He's got a little bit on that white line. Drifting up the track. And bam, right into the safer barriers. They're trying to make the transition.
Good correction by him to keep it pointed in the right direction and not have a yellow come out. But I will say that that 3-car group that was working together is no more. Craig Lautensanger has pulled away from the other 2 that were working together, Justin Mons and Kyle Benson. He's sort of trying to get in front of them, and maybe he thinks he saved enough fuel at this point and is trying to make it to the end of this race. And Brian M. Smith has really closed this gap, Kenneth. You'll see him soon if you look right there. He's catching up to the back of these guys, and he made an extra pit stop, and he is closing at an enormous rate with the fresh tires. So this could actually be working in Brian M. Smith's favor.
Well, now all of these guys are saving. You see that entire line of cars from about 3rd to 6th. And now Brian M. Smith, who has no worries about fuel, about tires, he's going to start to pounce as you see him right there out of the rear bumper of Kyle Benson. He'll probably look to the inside as they head for turn 1. And indeed, he will. Brian M. Smith going to go to the inside for P6.
And he has the entire line of cars for position right in front of him. Everybody here for position. Lautensanger has a problem. He's slow on the racetrack. But here comes Brian M. Smith trying to pounce on Justin Mons, being very aggressive. 3 wide in turn 2, trying to Warner all the racetrack, and he's looking like he has a little bit of an issue trying to keep out of the way. Brian M. Smith working his way into 3rd. Justin Mons not trying to give up, almost into the grass, but he'll take over that position. So the 78, Kenneth, he is really making this strategy work, and that is due to him pitting early and giving himself the time to use those tires.
What a push by the 78 of Brian M. Smith, trying to reach to the front of the field, and as they cross the line, they'll take 15 laps to go. Here's Brian M. Smith to the inside of Austin Reedy for 2nd. The gap maintains at about 1.6 seconds between now Smith's 2nd and Nicholas Vizzuti, 75 in the race lead. 15 laps to go from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and the 2-shop strategy for Brian M. Smith might exactly work if we stay green.
And don't look now, but Scott Healy is going to catch that same group back there, and he could do just what Brian M. Smith did to all 5 of those guys and work his way into that 3rd spot with enough time to go. He has enough time to do so, 15 laps to go, and we saw Brian M. Smith, who now goes for the inside and will take over the race lead from Nicholas Vizzuti, who goes way up the racetrack. So Brian M. Smith, not only does he have better tires than the rest of the field, but he's already gotten back to the race lead. This is a win-win for that 78. And at this point, he doesn't want a caution to come out. He knows he's good to go to the end of the race, and maybe some other people aren't. And now he's just going to try to run the laps and go to the end of the race. But as I was finishing saying, Scott Healy now has an opportunity to catch this group, as I think actually Nicholas Vizzuti came down pit road that time.
And Nicholas Vizzuti way slow on the racetrack. He's now making his 2nd stop here. He falls to 8th. That, of course, gives a position to Scott Healy, who's trying to catch up to the group of Tyler Warner, Craig Lautensanger, and Kyle Benson, also along with Austin Reedy and Justin Mons. So now this poses an even different situation for these guys, because you were trying to save, now you try to push, but at this point, you're behind a driver who is on at least better fuel than you are, a better fuel situation, while also being on fresher tires. So it's going to make it even harder, as now Smith comes off turn 4. He'll take 13 laps to go with about a 3-second lead over the rest of the field.
I was confused as to why that group was saving as much fuel as they did. They pitted with enough laps to make it to the end of the race without having to save even a little bit, but if they had to, it shouldn't have been that much and for that long. So I'm not behind the race car. I'm not sure what the exact fuel calculations are going on inside those race cars, but based off the information I had, and considering Scott Healy's previous run, which wasn't quite a fuel save run per se, I had a good enough feeling that they were going to be fine to make it on just the 1 stop without even needing to save. But here comes Brian Smith, pits twice and overtakes them all with well over 15 laps to go, and is really building a significant gap to the rest of the field. And he's in the cap burn scene right now, hoping that there's no caution from here to the end.
And this may end up as a second place for Scott Healy. He just got by Craig Lonsauger, and now he's well on the way to get by both Kyle Benson and Austin Reedy. You see the gap there? Up to Justin Mons, who's now pulled away from this top 4, at least for now. You see Scott Healy, the amount of fresh tires he has, and just going to power right by the 4. Benson as they head back to turn 1, and probably going to do the same to Reedy as they go to the back straightaway. And just only making it easier for this 2-stop strategy. Brian M. Smith, though, coming to the back straightaway. He'll catch 11 laps to go from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And what a call this was. He's won on 2 different disciplines so far this season. On the road course at Daytona, then on the intermediate at Las Vegas, and now with a chance to capture a 2-mile-plus speedway victory at Indianapolis in the Brickyard as he comes off turn 4 to 11 laps to go.
You know, and I called that strategy too, and it was probably a skeptical decision to make at the time because you have the lead and you're not sure exactly what's going to happen. But when that other group decided to start saving fuel, it was the perfect time for these two to come down pit road. Take advantage that they were going slower, put the tires on, give yourself the time to catch up to them, and they wasted no time doing so. And it's going to result in a 1-2 if we stay green here, Kenneth. So that strategy, a difficult one, but one that was able to come to fruition.
I know you see the separation. There's a 3-car train for the top 5. Benson leading a train of Lonsauger and Warner. Jacob Smith, he also pitted a little bit earlier. He got his faster pair. He's on somewhat fresher tires as well. So we could see him gather some positions before this race is all said and done. We have 12 drivers on the lead lap right now. The last one being the 14 of Roman Long. And I think for this, Scott Healy will probably get the benefactor on everybody here on this strategy and in the strategy move for the playoff situation. If he moves in his second, that's going to be an extra point gain. He's going to break the tiebreaker with Tyler Murray and probably at least jump on Vizzuti and Lonsauger on the way there. Just a handful of points separating them. So Healy may be on the strategy for gold coming out of Indianapolis as you see a Christopher Bishop lap car go by.
And right now, Healy is hoping for people like Tyler Warner to get up there and pass these other guys who are still out there on those older tires, trying to still save fuel to the end of this race. He's hoping that those drivers are able to go up there and pass them because that's more points for him because it takes away from them. So it's a chess match, and actually Tyler Warner got past Craig Lonsauger, and now Jacob Smith is one of the next cars to get by them if he's able to catch up. There you see right there Tyler Warner now getting by the 4 of Kyle Benson, or trying to at least, but he will get the job done eventually, as you can anticipate with the new tires. So right now, Scott Healy is Tyler Warner's biggest fan. He wants him to go up there and pass everybody and find himself in the 4th position behind Healy, and eventually also get past Mons, who Healy is trying to work over right now.
He's had a little bit of trouble trying to get around Justin Mons. You saw an attempted pass by the 42 Christopher Bishop, but that came to no avail. 64 was able to at least defend him. Coming off turn 2, almost contact with Bishop there. I think Mons going to try to block as far down to the white line, almost to the grass even, but the distance still separating these two. I'm not sure whether Scott Healy has been able to really capture this position yet. Maybe he's used up the tires a little bit too much on his pursuit. But coming to 8 laps to go, the 78 of Brian M. Smith will try to lap Roman Long and try to go a couple laps more for his 3rd race victory this season.
And this is the part of the race where you're just anxious. You're really anxious because there's 8 laps to go in the race, and you have the race in hand. You feel that you will get this win should nothing go wrong, and that's just it. You're not sure if things will go wrong. You're not sure if there's going to be a late caution. You're not sure if you're going to catch a lap car and make contact. You're not sure what's going to happen between now and the end of the race. You can only guarantee what you're doing now, which is why you have to stay disciplined and sort of keep yourself patient. But speaking of discipline, there you see these 3 battling. We have the lapper of Christopher Bishop, and you have the 64 of Scott Healy, who almost goes into the back of the 41 of Justin Mons.
Well, that was close between these two. Healy still having a whale of a time trying to get around the 41 of Mons, who continues to defend for a position that's only allowing Brian M. Smith to continue walking away. 7 laps to go this time by gap at about 7.3 seconds between the leader and everybody else on the racetrack. There seems to be small battle here. Tyler Werner not going to creep up on Austin Reedy. This is for the top 4 on the racetrack as Werner's got the fresher tires. Healy now to the back bumper. We'll see if he makes a move to the back straightaway this time.
Jacob Smith has also caught up to Kyle Benson and is starting to work his way around Craig Lonsdorf. I believe he's about half a second behind them. There you see him right there. He is caught up to them and should in due time get past these two. So these are points that these two are losing. Lonsdorf and Kyle Benson are top 2 in the standings, so they won't lose too much relative to one another. But they are losing in the long run to people like Scott Healy here at Indianapolis currently right now. But fortunately for most of them, there's a lack of playoff drivers really in the top 5 right now. Brian M. Smith isn't in the playoffs. Justin Mons is not in the playoffs. So you're really at least not losing too much, but you still are losing valuable points that maybe you could have picked up, and that might make a difference after Kentucky.
And of course, you have to set this up over these couple races, and I think that's a beneficiary of what you have in this system is that you have at least more than 3 races, about 4 races here to set yourself up to be in that championship 5. So it's not championship 4. You're going in with 10 drivers, and then you cut it down by half, and you have 5 drivers running for the title. So you have a better shot ultimately when you start the playoffs to make it to the championship and at least get there to Charlotte and have a shot to win it all in this series. But at that point, you have a good amount of races to set it up and a lot of different disciplines to work through. Of course, you had a Richmond last week. If you're better at short tracks, you have this track here. If you're better at the big ovals, you have Kansas next Wednesday night when we get to the intermediates once more, a track that usually uses a lot of momentum and uses very different grooves to get around there and to stay fast. That's also going to be another challenge. And then you have the flatter and a little bit shorter Kentucky Speedway. That's also going to provide a different challenge when the tires start to wear out and once runs start to develop. So you have a plethora of races to gather all these points. And I think for Scott Healy, this is a step in the right direction to keep himself sealed above the top 5 and at least keep himself comfortable of any risk of elimination in this round. But speaking of which, all the way up to the front of this field, we've talked about Brian M. Smith. His strategy has so far worked. Still green, coming to 4 laps to go.
And I think the most crucial thing to mention, Kenneth, is we're going to be running 3 straight mile and a halves to end the season. Mile and a half is the championship race, and the mile and a half is the next 2 to end this playoff round to get into the championship round. So the mile and a halves are very crucial to making that championship round. Not only do you have to perform there, but if you're going to try and be racing for the championship, you have to use those mile and a halves as a practice or to try to improve on the mile and a half programs yourself, because that's the kind of platform you'll be on the championship stage. So you cannot afford to be weak on the mile and a halves to end the season, because that's where you'll make it to the championship, but that's also where you can win the championship. So nobody can afford to be struggling the next 3 weeks, Kenneth, because you can miss the championship or you could lose the championship just by missing it.
I think it's probably good that you have these 2 tracks to start. And for right now, it's looking to seem like 2 non-playoff drivers are going to win the first 2 playoff races. We had Dalton Tucker in his first start at the Richmond Raceway take away the win. He's not a playoff driver, and neither is Brian M. Smith, despite his 2 wins this year. Now coming to 3 laps to go, looking for his 3rd win and taking, at least stealing another one from playoff drivers, as now Scott Healy finally gets around Justin Mons for 2nd. And this will set him up well. Just need to keep it clean for the final 3 laps and hope that a yellow flag does not wave.
And speaking of not wanting yellow flags to wave, definitely the 78 does not want to see any yellow flags waving at any point in time. He has almost a 9-second lead that he's worked very hard to keep. And most of those drivers that pitted just the one time under this green flag run are well over 30 seconds behind your race leader right now. So they've incredibly fallen off over this long run here, Kenneth. And it's really been to my surprise. I did not anticipate them falling off that much, but part of it is due to the over-saving of fuel. I don't believe they should have been saving that much fuel. Again, I'm not in the race car making that decision, but it just, based on the calculations, they definitely had more than enough to save even a minor bit if they had to. So this is, it's been an interesting take from those drivers all afternoon, but it's the one they chose to take, and now they're going to have to accept their fate and move on next week to the Kansas Speedway.
Coming to the white flag, just 2 more corners before that white flag is displayed for the 78 of Brian M. Smith. If the yellow does not come out now, then it will not affect the rest of this race. Coming off turn 4, the 78 of Brian M. Smith will take the white flag for 2.5 more miles around the Brickyard. He's kept it clean. The 2-stop strategy has worked. There's Barney waving the flag. 1 more to go from Indianapolis.
2.5 miles left for the driver of the 78. And Kenneth, it was not easy for him. He was in a tough spot at one point in this race with the strategy and was not sure what to do. But just like I had mentioned, if he had come down pit road early in that run, it would have worked out in his favor. I would have never imagined it would have been this strong of a move, but it worked out in his favor. He's got a big lead, and he is half a lap away from getting a win at the Brickyard. A big win it would be for the driver of this 78, who's already gotten 2 this season at 2 different disciplines. He's got a lap car right in front of him who's in the wall, but he's going to give him more than enough space to get by. No issues there, and he's heading for home as he comes to the front straightaway.
Back to the front straightaway, and the yard of bricks. 3rd different discipline win for the 78 of Brian M. Smith. Smith takes it from Indianapolis. Scott Healy to come home 2nd as he crosses the start-finish line. Playoff competitor with Justin Mons in 3rd. Jacob Smith on fresh tires. Gonna go straight to the inside wall, but he won't have to worry. He'll take 4th. And Tyler Warner to cap off your top 5. A big, big win for Scott Healy in the point standings. And a physical win for Brian M. Smith. His 3rd win of the season. A fantastic strategy that we questioned all the way to the end, Francisco. We didn't know whether it was going to work. But he played the distance right. He played the strategy correctly. And now he gets to celebrate.
It was a great job. It was not an easy one for the 78 by any means. Sure, he led a lot of laps and had a fast car, but the strategy mattered, and he was the one who played it right. Him and Scott Healy, for that matter. Scott Healy was having his own race and was able to come away with the 2nd place finish, the highest of the playoff finishers. So there you see them giving each other congratulatory taps next to one another. But you have to think, what does that mean for drivers like Kyle Benson, Craig Lonsauger? They finished towards the back end of the top 10. Those are crucial points that they've lost here today, and we'll have to see just what they have to do in order to make it up. But there you see the 78 burning it down on the front straightaway, celebrating yet another victory this season. There you see a couple of his buddies there celebrating also by that yard of bricks. Good win for him.
Fantastic win for the 78 of Brian M. Smith. You see him burning it down to turn 1. There's Kyle Benson trying to get around there, make some of that space. Healy also going to celebrate here, and we may end up seeing Scott Healy at the top of the point standings once we head to America's Heartland and Kansas Speedway next Wednesday night. But for now, we're going to take a look at your full field rundown, see exactly where every driver finished at the end of 80 laps here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Brian M. Smith, 3rd race win, comes here tonight, plays the strategy correctly with Scott Healy. They both finished in the first 2 spots. Justin Mons able to save enough on that 1-stop strategy. He's the only one on that strategy to finish within the top 5. Jacob Smith ends up in 4th with Tyler Warner to cap off your 5th position. The Nicholas Vizuzzi playoff driver moves up to 6th. Kyle Benson, Craig Lonsauger trying to save near the end. They end up 7th and 8th with Tyler Murray. Early incident, but he backs up to 9th. And Austin Reedy capping off your top 10.
Looking at the rest of today's field, we have Connor Cunningham finishing in the 11th position, 1 lap down. Roman Long in 12th. Christopher Bishop, another struggle for him today, a playoff driver finishing 13th. Preet Bruni finishing 2 laps down in the 14th position. Ricky Rosner, another struggle for him, finishing in the 15th position. Cody Ivey had his issue early on the race, spinning into turn number 2, will finish in the 16th position, 14 down. Edward Scherner, I'm not exactly sure what happened to the driver of the 20. He was running up front while much earlier in the race, but possibly connection issues took him out of the race. He finishes 26 laps down in the 17th position. Dalton Tucker, who was your pole sitter and running in the top 5, got into the wall after contact with Kyle Benson and decided to park it on pit road. And Brandon Gillis will round out your field after having 2 very quick incidents at the beginning of the race.
That's your entire field. 19 cars started this race, and it ends up with the checkered flag. Brian M. Smith, third race win of the season. We'll head to Victory Lane, the racing capital of the world. We'll have a chance to talk with your winner here tonight from the Brickyard. Coming here with Brian M. Smith, the driver of the 78. And Brian, I think coming to this strategy, nobody was sure whether this race is going to stay green. We had those flurry of yellows to start this race, and then all of a sudden it went strategy from there to the end all the way. And you pulled this strategy having to make 2 stops before the end of this race, and you end up maximizing it all, and you take your third race win of the season. Tell us how you pulled that off.
Yeah, guys, the name of the game was all clean air. I know there was a yellow about lap 20, and it was a tough call because we had 2 or 3 laps on our tires at that point, and I had to make the decision of pitting or staying out. And by staying out, I put myself in a pretty crappy situation there because those guys all got around me, as I'm sure everyone saw. And I had to make the call and hope it was going to stay green and short pit them. And I kind of figured they couldn't 1-pit, so figured if I chopped it into 3 20-lap runs, it was a nice way to do it, and it worked out.
Well, worked out to your favor, and this becomes the third different discipline you take a race win in this season. Of course, I mentioned the Daytona Road Course, your first race win here, and then going to Las Vegas, your first 1.5-mile win in this season, and then you come here to Indianapolis, and one of the crown jewel racetracks in all of racing in real life and in sim racing as well. You're able to capture the checker flag here as well. How do you feel about taking this win and kind of gathering those different disciplines of race wins over the course of this season so far?
Yeah, it's fun. I love racing at this track. It's a momentum track, especially with this high downforce package, low horsepower. And I really do feel like it's kind of like in a strange way, it's like a road course because it's all about momentum. And it's like in a road course, if you miss one turn up, then, the next 2 or 3 turns could get messed up. And it's like that entering turn 1 and turn 3 here. Because if you mess up going in there, you drive in too hot, the car just plows up the track. You're coming through 2 and 4, and you're just not carrying enough momentum. You're going to lose spots. So in that sense, it's like a road course. And I like to think I'm pretty solid at that type of racing. And I think it carries over to a track like this.
I think you carried it over. You also carried the strategy as well. Before this win, and you get to celebrate here at the Brickyard virtually, is there anybody you'd just like to give a shout out for this race and for this season? Any teams, any sponsors, or anybody else you'd just like to give the love and shout outs to tonight?
Yeah, thanks guys for broadcasting. I tuned in a couple times there during the race. You guys are doing an awesome job, and it was fun racing with my teammates, Scott and Jacob, so shout out to them, and everybody else who ran. It was a pretty clean race, so fun all around.
Well, we certainly appreciate the support, Brian. Congratulations on the win here for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And, of course, we look forward to seeing you for the final handful of races of this season, Kansas, Kentucky, and, of course, the Charlotte Oval to cap things off. We look forward to seeing you there, but we'll let you celebrate here from the Brickyard.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Brian M. Smith, the winner after it all here tonight from Indianapolis. And just like he said, played the strategy correctly, short pitted at the right time, and ends up walking away with a race win. 51 laps led also to his credit. But we're going to turn our attention to the only playoff driver in the top 3. Scott Healy plays the same strategy that your race leader and race winner did, and he ends up also finishing well between this podium, gathering some good points for next week at Kansas. He's sitting trackside with Francisco Baquea.
Well, Scott, starting deep in the field proved no trouble for you. You were able to make your way up through the field. We're on an alternative strategy with your teammate there who ended up winning the race, and then you both come away with a 1-2 finish. When it looked bleak at one point, I'll be honest, from the broadcast booth, but you guys pulled through. Just what was your mindset going through those laps, knowing that once you got into a green flag run, and we're getting past what you had to do?
I was a little bit short, so I decided to pit. I knew I had a long run car, so I tried to play it as that. Overall, it was a blast, battling with the 41 and everything like that. Just being there in the race, in the car, it's just a playing ground. You got to battle your way into the playoffs, and then you got to battle your way into the championship. Everything goes through your mind like that, and you just got to play your cards right.
And speaking of the playoffs, Scott, you are the highest finishing playoff driver here today, so that's going to give yourself a good chunk of points going into Kansas next week. But I do want to touch a little bit based on that we have 3.5 miles to end the season, 2 to end the round, and of course the championship race being at 1.5 miles. So given that, what do you think is going to be necessary from you to in order to maximize these next 2 races to get into the championship round?
Consistency, top 5 finishes. Just being patient with the throttle and the gas, patient with the car, try not to hit anything or anybody. Just overall, just try to be, in the race as much as possible.
And any team sponsors or people in particular you want to give a shout out to, and thanks for your top 2 finish here today.
Thank you guys, off Apex Designs, Crick Creek, Valvoline, everyone at OSR, friends and family. So that's what we like to thank today.
We appreciate you taking the time, Scott, and we wish you luck going into Kansas next week.
Thank you guys.
And it's Scott Healy coming home second, the playoff driver, looking to get a nice boost going into Kansas next Wednesday night. He ends up second after the checkered flag is waved. And then we go to the third place driver, Justin Mons in the 41. Ends up with yet again another podium this season, but also is the only driver in the top 3 to go with that one-stop strategy at around lap 50. So we'll try to get a word with him, a step down pit road, and here now with Justin Mons. And Justin, obviously, I think this race changed dramatically from the first half to the second half. You had this first half with all those yellows, kind of put everybody in probably the mindset that it was going to be this way for a long time. All of a sudden, it shifts on its head. It turns into a full strategy game. And you were one of the only drivers, if I'm not mistaken, to go for at least one less stop than the drivers right in front of you and play the game a little differently, but you still end up in the top 3. Walk us through your strategy and how you were able to do it here tonight from Indianapolis.
It was trying to keep the car clean. That's basically the first half there, because it got eventful. A lot of good racing in the top 5 in that first bit too. And then I slipped I was too far back in my stall at one point and lost some track position and fell to I want to say 8th, 9th, somewhere around there. So I had to work my way back through the field, but I had a decent car. I put in a little bit of extra practice this afternoon, just running and feeling out the car, and it helped. I got a lot of sexy moves out there, trying to use this draft. The draft is incredible with this update. It just absolutely just pulls you. But you gotta be careful on corner entry because it will just make you overshoot it and extremely tight. But yeah, on that last run, I ended up having to save a full lap of fuel, and I started from the first half of the fuel run, starting to cut off the engine, going into 1 and 3 at about 75% down the straights, and started just coasting, and I saved exactly the amount I needed. I ran out on the backstretch after the flag, so it was perfect.
Definitely perfect for you. And you mentioned it right there, the update with the season build that just came out today. And I reckon there was probably just a short time between the new update with the Cup cars and the drafting and the aerodynamics, and then, of course, this race that was scheduled for a long time already. How was that in terms of the adaptation for you? Because I reckon it must have been a little bit rushed trying to get everything settled and make sure your car was settled for tonight.
Well, let's say I had a learn on the move crash course, especially there at the end with the Scott Healy. Me and him, I hope y'all caught some of the battle there for P2, because he had 9 laps fresher tires than me, and I was absolutely working him every chance I could, just trying to stay ahead of him. And we had a dang good battle. But that's what, it all paid off, learning on the move like I did for the end of the race, because if I didn't have any experience with testing some of that stuff, Healy would have had no problem getting around me. But man, that was some good racing.
Definitely know how to wheel a race car, apart from at least the opposite to myself. Justin, a fantastic race here tonight. But before we let you go from Indianapolis, is there anybody you'd just like to give a shout out to? Any teams, any sponsors, or anybody else who makes it happen for you?
Absolutely. You see the sponsor on the car, Gamer Advantage. I'm not officially partnered with them, but great product. If you ever get the chance to check them out, please do. Great product. They got also autism awareness with NASCAR Sammy. He's on the C post of the car. He gave me the blessing to run him his sticker that he does. So get a chance to check him out. Does a lot of autism awareness stuff. I have a 6-year-old son that's autistic, so I'm a big advocate about that. Then the guys that helped me with this paint scheme, Tango Paints. If you're in the market, hit them up. Do make some quality paints. And thanks to you guys, Max Speed. Thanks to this group of guys. There's a lot of fast guys up in here. Very, very fun to compete with some high level guys.
I think we should probably give in the word for David Shieldhouse and Gamer Advantage to give you that official sponsorship so you can kind of work with them together. But nonetheless, a fantastic run here tonight, Justin, in the top 3. We congratulate you on your run, and of course, we wish you the best of luck moving forward from Kansas, Kentucky, and of course, the Charlotte Oval, the final race of this 2021 4-wide racing season. Congratulations tonight from the Brickyard.
Thanks so much, Kenneth. Good job on the broadcast, boys.
Justin Mons ends up within the top 3. He'll be your final driver interview of the night. Pretty sure we can try to reach out to David Shieldhouse, get him that Gamer Advantage sponsorship, and hopefully have that as official on his race car as he comes home 3rd tonight. We'll bring it back to the booth, though, atop the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And Francisco, I think we had a very interesting time here at this racetrack, and with this race being in the playoffs, guys like Scott Healy, those storylines going to transfer well into America's Heartland, Kansas Speedway next week. Coming from this track, now with the new updates in these cars, going to that intermediate, how do drivers approach this one now if they want to get those well-needed points?
I think some of them are going to need some of that Clint Boyer energy, if you know what I'm talking about. Going into a race like Kansas, with everything that's on the line, they got to work for it, but at the same time, they have to be smart about their approach. You can't just go in there and give it all without any thought, because then that's just going in reckless, and that could potentially cost yourself very early in that race. We saw a couple drivers struggle early on in the race here today, and it wasn't exactly faults of their own, but they also have to be aware of their surroundings at a certain point in time. So they're going to have to prepare. They're going to have to be ready. They have now time to practice with the newly changed setups from the recent build to try and get used to how the car is going to handle at Kansas now, given the fact that it'll probably be a little bit different than it was maybe beforehand. So at least they'll have time to prepare for that one a little bit more so than today. But regardless, at the end of the day, they have to go out there, perform, and watch their tires, make sure they get the strategy right. And it's easier said than done. So we're going to see that play out, and not just next week, but of course at Kentucky as well, given the fact that it is another mile and a half on the schedule. So I think that's it from me, Kenneth. I'm ready to go back to Austria.
Well, of course they're ready to go back to the Red Bull Ring, but I think we're well looking forward to what's going to happen at Kansas Speedway next week. And of course, if you want to take at least more of our coverage from the 4-Wide Racing Cup Series, if you want to continue to watch our series all the way to the Championship 5 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, you can definitely do so, and that'll be next Wednesday night, 9-10 p.m. Eastern. We'll have our live coverage from the Kansas Speedway. We'll continue to try and decide who's going to get into the Championship 5, how the points will shake out, and whether we get a playoff winner. We've seen the top 2 races in the playoffs end up with 2 winners that are not part of the playoffs and non-playoff drivers. So we'll see how things change. Of course, again, 9-10 p.m. Eastern, right here on youtube.com/MaxSpeedTV. Well, that'll do it for our coverage here tonight from the Brickyard and Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Got to give a big thank you to Tyler Murray, Matt Roberts, Roman Long, Craig Lonsarger, Austin Reedy, all the guys as a part of the race council that make these races happen each and every week. And on behalf of all of us at MaxSpeedTV and my colleague in the booth, Francisco Bacallao, my name is Kenneth Bueno, saying so long from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and congratulations to Brian M. Smith, 3rd race win of 2021.